Hey, what's up? This is Chosen, and this is going to be a Raid Shadow Legends video that Plarium is doing as a fun little thing with all of the different content creators in the Raid Shadow Legends content creator program, where we talk about some of our big mistakes or newbie blunders or dark secrets or times that we were the most wrong. They're calling it like a Raid content creator confessional type thing. So I'm going to go through the history of my journey as a player and a content creator and talk about a few of the times that I was super confused or did something stupid or had a opinion that ended up being totally wrong and all that. We're gonna have fun with this one here on a Sunday for Raid. Let's get into it. Alrighty, so first of all, when I started playing Raid, it wasn't even my plan to cover the game and do content on it here on this channel and all of that. When I actually started playing Raid, I was just bored one night. I was kind of scrolling through my phone before I went to bed, looking for something to mess around on until I got tired enough to fall asleep, and I stumbled across Raid. And what my goal was with this channel, I was a Diablo PC gamer, Overwatch, StarCraft, all of that, who was doing content on a different channel that is now my Diablo channel. But this channel, this Chosen Plays channel, the original concept was going to be that I play a bunch of different mobile games and then I review them here on the channel. So my literal first video on this channel is me going through and reviewing Raid Shadow Legends and talking about the graphics and the gameplay and just all of the different categories of ranking a game. And I was going to do that for Raid and then do that for another game and then do that for another game. And I was just going to have people subscribe to the channel if they're looking for a general overarching overview of all the different mobile games and kind of the ones that I like and I dislike and all of that. That was the original concept, but then I ended up finding myself liking Raid, and I was like, well, let me upload a video about this, and let me upload a video about this, and then here we are 4 years later, and my channel is mainly a Raid channel. So the first game that I literally covered for that concept ended up kind of sucking me in, and here we are. And as far as that opening night when I first started playing, I would say a mistake that I made was I ended up picking Galek as my starting champion. And obviously, as most of you know, when you start playing the game, you are presented with a choice between Elaine, Aethel, Kayle, and Galek as your 4 starting champions that you get to choose from. And I remember having a big debate with myself on which one to pick. And back then, there was literally no resources. There was no tier list. There was no content creators. There was no really anything going on. We were all just kind of out there learning the game independently. And my thought process was I didn't know anything about, Kayle placing poisons or Elaine has 2 AoEs. This was literally my first gacha game ever. I had no clue what I was doing. And my thought process was, Galek is the literal logo of the app, this big badass looking orc, so I can't go wrong picking him, so I picked him. Well then, as I start learning the game and all of that, we end up learning that Galek is actually the worst choice for starting champion, so I was like, okay, of course. And something that a lot of you may not know from back then is that the meta pick was actually Aethel, because back in the day, in the early days of Raid, obviously the clan boss, the Demon Lord, was the best source of acquiring loot to progress your account. And there was no War Master mastery, there was only Giant Slayer. So the meta was getting as many triple hit champions as you can, 3-4 hits to get those Giant Slayer procs constantly. Aethel not only was a starting champion with a triple hit A1, but she also placed the Weaken on the A1, and back in the day, the Weaken debuff made poisons tick harder. So Aethel was like uber god tier meta in the early days of Raid, like those first 4 or 5 months until they added the War Master mastery and changed a few things. But yeah, Aethel was the clear cut god tier choice, and of course I picked Kayle. And then after they added War Master and they made it so Weaken doesn't buff poisons, Kayle kind of slid into that spot of being the most sought after starting champion. So then after all of that, when I finally embarked on the Raid journey, I remember being such an idiot and not knowing what the difference between Ancient Shards and Void Shards is, because I went into the tab and I looked and they had the exact same odds. It was like, okay, Ancient 91.5, 8, and 0.5. And Voids have the exact same rates. I was like, what in the world? Like, for those first few days and this being my first gacha game, I had no clue what the affinities meant and all that, or what the different elements or what was going on. And I was just like, they're the exact same odds. Like, what is going on here? How is that how are they? I remember being confused about that for like a day or two and not having any clue why they had 2 different shards between Ancients and Voids. And then also, this is more of a funny confessional type thing than like an in-game mistake. But back in the early days of Raid, there were really no tools like RSO Helper or multi-battles. They've added that as a mechanic. There was no multi-battles or tools or anything kind of going on in the early days of Raid, and I hadn't really learned about BlueStacks and all of that yet. So I literally bought a device like you're seeing right here, and what you can do is kind of clip it to your phone and it will simulate finger taps, and I would put that on the replay button when I was doing something like Minotaur grinding so that I could have it in like my desk at work. And what I found out was it's a little bit too loud. It's like you can literally hear it auto clicking. So I was like, oh no, that's not gonna work. So I can only use it like at home, because otherwise people are gonna be like, what is that sound coming from your desk? So my goal was to be able to like grind Minotaur at work, and back then I wasn't a full-time content creator, so it ended up not really being worth it, and it was basically $50 flushed down the drain, because by the time I figured out I could only use it at home, then I was starting to learn about BlueStacks, and then we were starting to get some other tools coming to the game, so ended up not really being anything other than a funny meme of a thing that I wasted money on. But in terms of like huge mistakes when playing, anybody that watches my content knows that I'm pretty reserved, pretty conservative, pretty like disciplined in terms of planning for the future and all of that. I don't really like to YOLO and do a bunch of craziness. I'm just a pretty stable Raid player that focuses on the macro picture of everything. So I didn't really ever do anything crazy like use a legendary book on a rare champion, or like sacrifice some legendary or epic that I really needed on my account. I really, from the very beginning, was really diligent about making sure I use the right resources in the right spot, and that I don't sacrifice anybody unless I at least have 2 or 3 copies of them, which back in the day, the fusions were a lot different. The fusions would be champions that are already in the game. So you'd see a fusion like the Razer fusion that's live right now, and the epics would be like Sinesha, Miscreated Monster, Tayrell, and Alika or something. Like, it would be 4 epics that are already in the game, and you could get rewarded by saving a copy of them in your vault. So back in the day, everybody was super worried about making sure we keep copies of rares and epics, so that when a fusion like Razovarg happens, we can just plug and play and GG, complete the fusion. Well, Plarium kind of put the kibosh on that and started doing fusions with like new champions that we can't really save up for. So it kind of changed the landscape of how we all manage our accounts and how we save duplicate champions and all that. But in terms of account management, I was mostly pretty good about being diligent and doing things the proper way and making sure that I'm focused on the long-term health of my account. And obviously, when you talk about champions every single day for years, and you talk about a game, you're going to be wrong at some point. You're going to be right at some point. You're going to have some opinions that you look back on and you're like, are you kidding me? I can't believe I thought that. And I would say probably, just to be transparent, the most I've ever been wrong about a champion was probably when Rotos was being added to the game. When I pulled him up and kind of first looked at his kit, I did come around pretty quickly, but when I first reaction, you know how it is, like when they release a bunch of new champions, you pull them up and you talk about like, okay, so here's an A1, here's an A, and so when Rotos first came out, my initial grade of him was like a B- or something. I was like, okay, so he's got an A1 that places defense down, but you're going to have to build him with accuracy, that means, and he starts with 0 accuracy, so it's going to be hard to build him as like a nuker who can also defense break, and he has no AoE. Like, okay, he can single target and get a little bit more HP, but he's only going to kill 1 thing at a time, maybe 2 if he gets an extra turn, but then everything's on cooldown. So like the thing is back then when Rotos came out, I didn't know how good Sify was going to be and how good she was going to pair with him and make them a tandem. And B, the meta was all about AoE. It was just, you use Arbiter to go first, and then you defense break, and then you nuke down with AoE nukers like a Foley or something. There was no single target champions being used. It was not meta at all. So when I first kind of read this, I was like, okay, he's a damage dealer who's going to need accuracy, and his base stats are kind of low. I mean, 11,800 HP. Like, okay, he's decent. I'll give him like a B-. If he had at least 1 AoE ability, I would bump him up to like B+ or A-. And you know, I quickly found out once we were able to kind of test Rotos a little bit, and I was able to learn a little bit more about the game and the context of how the meta was going to be evolving. I quickly learned how good Rotos was going to be. But it's just kind of a funny time that I was insanely wrong about my first reaction to a champion. And obviously this is years ago, so we've all learned a lot more about the context of the game since then. You know, back when I was assessing Rotos, I was a complete noob in terms of knowledge compared to what I am now, and hopefully I'll be able to say the same thing a year or two from now. But then to counterpoint that, maybe the time looking back that I was the most right in hindsight, when it was like a controversial opinion, was when they came out with Faction Wars, and I was just kind of doing some anecdotal playtesting and charting. You know how I am with like spreadsheets and stuff. I'm charting runs and all that. I was doing faction crypt runs, and I was starting to tell everybody, I don't think there's any difference between running stage 20 or stage 21 in terms of the quality of glyphs that you're getting. I think you're just as good to run 20 or 21, and it doesn't really matter if your main goal is glyphs, so don't stress out about running stage 21. And what happened when I said that is people came out just roasting me relentlessly about how stupid I am, how I'm an idiot for saying that stage 21 drops the same level of glyphs, and or stage 20 drops the same glyphs as 21, and that of course you should do 21 if you can because it gives you better glyphs and all that. Well, then it comes out we end up like data mining the data, and stage 20 and stage 21 are exactly the same when it comes to glyphs. So it was a little bit of a vindication there after being roasted for everybody calling me wrong, and I ended up being the first person that was on that in terms of being right. So that's just kind of like one example of when I was really wrong over the years and when I was really right over the years. And then one time there was a funny example of me making a horrible mistake when I was going to do some Minotaur grinding. I loaded up like the 2500 energy or whatever to grind masteries. And then I went to set up, like my team right now is Septimus Herndig. And then I put in whoever's masteries I'm maxing. Well, what I did was I was kind of like distracted doing something. And I went to click on the champion that I was going to grind masteries for and add them. But I like misclicked. I clicked like in between the champions or something, and it didn't actually add them. So I clicked, it didn't add them. And then I looked over at my like RSL and I clicked play and I left the room. And I ran that 2500 energy just completely wasted. I didn't even put the champion in there to get masteries. So just like funny things like that happen over the years. But that was definitely one that I did in relation to the Minotaur and wasted just a bunch of resources. So boom, there we have it. That is my raid confessional over the years, and thanks to Plarium for including me in this fun project where they're going to have a playlist of all the different creators kind of doing a video like this, and I'm excited to see what the other creators say in terms of their mishaps and mistakes and all of that. So I would definitely recommend checking out the full playlist, and it's going to be fun to hear from the other creators in that context as well. And feel free to let me know down below what are some funny things that you've experienced or done over the years. It's always fun to hear the perspective from the community as well. So yeah, remember to subscribe on your way out if you enjoy daily Raid Shadow Legends content. I will see you soon in the next video. Appreciate you. Thanks for watching. Peace.